There's a couple things going on. So these college football rankings aren't necessarily brought all the way, like these aren't actual true rankings. So what I want to look at is this is all based off of the ESPN post-spring rankings. Again, these are not official. They're not going to be set official until this closer to college football season starts. But this is what ESPN ranked as their top 10 following the post-spring ball. So I believe that this was posted in May. So it has been a couple of months since this has kind of been updated. So this is kind of a loosely based list. So this is what we're going to have to kind of go off of. But looking at this list, Nathan, I kind of want your opinion on this. Both Nathan and Dalton's teams are in this. Nathan is a big Longhorns fan, saw him off. And then Dalton is a big Alabama fan. I am a Baylor fan. We are not probably even in the top 75, so we will not talk about that. We are looking at only the top 10. Nathan, though, which team do you think is in the most trouble in this top 10 list?
Probably Notre Dame. Well, I don't know. Maybe Michigan. Michigan is coming off the national championship, and they had a stellar year last year, but they lost a lot of people. They lost their head coach. So it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of bounce back this year, especially since like now they've added USC and UCLA into the mix and Oregon. So it their schedule's going to get a lot harder this year. Also, same for Georgia. Like if you go back and you look at Georgia's schedule too, like they have a tough schedule too. They got to play Alabama, and they have to play Texas. They got to play Tennessee. So I'm excited now because Georgia won't have that easy walk schedule where they're playing, Kentucky and South Carolina and Florida. Now they have to play Alabama in the regular season, and they have to play Texas in the regular season. And if I'm not mistaken, Dalton, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think when they play Alabama, it is in Tuscaloosa.
Georgia, yes, it is in Tuscaloosa.
Georgia also has to play Texas in Austin. So those are two pretty big games to play on the road in the regular season. So really, I don't see Georgia going undefeated this year. I don't. I can see them losing one game, maybe two. But also, you want to mention the top three teams that are on this ranking. Neither one of those three teams were in the playoffs last year. Not a single one. So it's interesting that ESPN came out with these early rankings with the way they did. But yeah, I think any of these teams, with the way the schedule's set out, can easily lose 2 to 3 games. But I'm curious to see how Michigan is going to do. And I'm also curious about Penn State too. Like they always struggled against Ohio State, and they always struggle against Michigan. And now you add in USC, UCLA, Oregon. So it's just going to get tougher and tougher when you go into conference plays for all these teams. So I think it's going to be an exciting year of college football. A lot of people are not excited about the conference's realignment and what's been going on, but I like it. It's going to force these teams like Georgia to have to play Alabama in the regular season, have to play Texas in the regular season. It's going to be an exciting year of college football, and I can't wait to watch what happens.
Yeah, my excitement is just as matched. I think a lot of people's are too, and I'm glad we're getting, like I said, this college football 25 in a little bit because it's helping alleviate some of the pain. But Michigan is kind of an interesting take. Like, I do think that obviously their schedule is going to get harder, but it's going to get harder in the sense of like Oregon being added to that Big Ten mix. I'm not concerned with USC and I'm not concerned with UCLA. I used to be one of the biggest Lincoln Riley buyers there was whenever he went from Oklahoma to USC. I don't care anymore. I think, honestly, all of that is washed up. He had Caleb Williams. He had the number 1 overall draft pick going into the NFL, and they were very mediocre last year. Like, your team arguably got worse this year, right? So because of that, I don't really know how much Michigan's schedule got harder. I would be really surprised. Even if they come in at 6, I don't really think they're going to fall outside of the top 10. Georgia is a very interesting one that you were saying, though. They're one of the ones that actually do have a tougher competition because some of their hardest competition is going on the road to play a lot of these top teams, right? If UT and Alabama manage to stay top 5 by the time they come and face Georgia, they're going to have 2 games within their season on the road at top 5 schools. That's a tough road. Now, granted, I don't know if they'll ever fall outside of the top 10 either. That's just kind of my take on that.
Yeah, I think for me, like I'm not too worried about the SEC other than Alabama. Like for me, the only reason I'm worried about Alabama is because the conference has definitely gotten a lot tougher and a lot stronger now that they've added OU and Texas. And if looking at Texas, they have 7 returners coming to that offense. Like, and they've got Sarkisian to boot, built by Bama baby. But then again, like Texas is they are a great team. I think they're going to be great again this year. And so, like DJ, like you were saying, Georgia it has a very tough matchup this year. I am worried about them. I don't think they fall outside the top 10. If they do lose to Texas and Alabama, they're both away games for Georgia. So if they do lose those games, it's not like it's the end of the world for them, especially if they're close games. I think they stay in the top 10. They go to the playoffs. They may not compete for the SEC championship, but they'll be fine. However, I'm going to take more of Nathan's side, and I'm going to disagree with you, DJ, though. However, for Michigan, that is the one I am concerned with the most. And I actually think they will miss the top 12 top 12 teams. They only have one returning starter on their offense, and they only have 4 returning starters on their defense. They have done decently well when it's come to recruiting, but they are going to have to develop and rebuild this program under a new coaching staff. With Jim Harbaugh being gone, this is a big deal to them. I think this is where Ryan Day and Ohio State can finally come up and Penn State as well. They have an opportunity to overtake Michigan and take a grasp in this new conference in the Big Ten. And let's not forget, Oregon just got added as well. They're going to face them in week 9. And they're going to face, I think, Oregon coming in. I think this has a very good opportunity for Oregon to come in day one, first year, and compete for a Big Ten championship with Ohio State. I think Ohio State and Oregon are both much better teams than Michigan is right now. They're going to face Texas week 2 to begin the season, who has, like I said, 7 returners on that offense. So they're going to look very similar to what they were last year. Oregon in week 9, and then they're going to finish off the season with Ohio State week 12, and it's going to be on the road versus Ohio State. So, like I said, if they face Texas and they lose to Texas to begin, and then they are to lose to a very good Oregon team, and then they go to Ohio State with 2 losses to end the season, that's a tough game. And you guys know how it is in college football to lose a game late. Ohio State is probably going to be the toughest matchup they're going to face in that season at week 12 on the road. So I just feel like that they have a really good chance if they lose those 2 games and then lose on the road to Ohio State, especially big, they will miss the top 12, and they're going to miss out on the first top 12 2024 playoffs. So I think this is going to be Oregon and Ohio State running the show this year in the Big Ten, and I think Michigan's in danger. So
it's going to be interesting to see how Oregon transfers over into the Big Ten. Like if you watch the Pac-12 last year, there wasn't much defense in that conference. It was you go back and you watch the Colorado and the USC game. It was just like 400 or 500 passing yards, high scoring games. It's a high powered offensive conference. And then you're going to come into the Big Ten where you have schools like Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan who play good defense, Iowa who plays good defense. Really, it's anything can really happen too. It's just I think it's gonna nobody really knows, right, with this conference realignment. Like it's really just up in the air. It's like Dalton said, who's playing the best football come the last 3 weeks of the season. It's really what it is, and you're gonna really find out how good of a football team Michigan is come week 2 when they have to play Texas, because like Dalton said, we have a lot of people coming back on our offense, and we have some good people still coming back on our defense. So Texas is going to be even better than they were last year. So that's what I'm excited for. But just college football in general, it's going to be. I think it's going to be great weeks every week with great matchups. It's going to be a fun year of college football with new teams and new conferences and the way that the matchups are going to fall. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah. And I did want to kind of loop back. I'm not saying that Michigan isn't kind of a team in trouble. I do agree that they're in a team in trouble. I do think it's kind of like I think they're the ones that's probably the most volatile just because of the amount of change, and we're ready to see kind of how that change plays out. So looking at here, I think the top 5 is pretty solid. Alabama is probably the one that I worry about the most in the top 5, but it's for all of the same reasons that I think I'm worried about Michigan as well because of all of the change. What are we to expect? At least Alabama still has Jalen Milroe. Like, I know that they always send a lot of people to the draft year to year. They do a really good job of getting recruits and everybody else coming back. But this is now year one of post Saban era, right? Like what exactly does that look like? Again, I don't know necessarily how Alabama's going to be. I do see them possibly sometime this year falling outside of the top 10, but I still think that they're going to probably find themselves in a college football playoff position. Just don't know where that's at. But I think it's safe to say that at some point throughout this year, they're bound to fall outside of that top 10 spot, right?
Alabama is going to be it's not, don't get this wrong, and people might think that we're just hating on Alabama because Dalton's on here. That is not true. Alabama is a fantastic football team, and they have a fantastic program. The only thing with Alabama is that Nick Saban, the way he coached the defensive side of the football in Alabama, and the way that his players played for him, it was incredible. The way he was able to make coaching changes, the way he was to outsmart other coaches, the way he was be able to make changes on the fly, the way he was be able to do it in the fourth quarter, the way, that's what Alabama's going to miss. So I think when you have, if Alabama's in closer games like that, every year they're playing a couple of close games and they get that factor and they get that win because of Nick Saban and his coaching ability, and he's been in it for so long, he's been in the game for so long. He's like, hey, look for this, watch this, do this, expect this, and Saban's just so good at that. And I think if Alabama loses the game, it'll be because of that. It's like you said, it's not because they're not talented enough to beat that team. It's just the factor of Nick Saban. You have to take that into consideration. And I think it'll take a year or two to get back to that, or to DeBoer maybe being like that, but you can't compare DeBoer to Nick Saban, because Nick Saban is one of the greatest college football coaches to ever walk the planet. So,
no, 100%. I mean, you guys are absolutely right. I mean, there's a lot of things to be worried about. I mean, actually, there's really not a lot of things to be worried about. I would just say it's just Nick Saban being gone is really the only thing to worry about. And and most people be like, well, he's gone, like you guys aren't going to be the same. Well, to Alabama's defense, I would just say that I think this Alabama team is much better than the Washington team that Kalen DeBoer had last year. And we've seen what Kalen DeBoer did, taking his team to the national championship, and beating Texas. He's done it, and getting to where he's at. Like, I just think he's going to be okay. And the recruits he's bringing in, it's like we've never skipped a beat. Alabama has probably actually done better recruiting this year and for 2025. We're currently ranked number 1 in 2025 recruiting in 5 stars and 4 stars than Nick Saban has ever done. So he's actually, when it comes to recruiting, I mean, he is off the record books for us. And so I think he does bring in that talent. It's just like DJ, you said, can he actually replicate that to the game like Nick Saban always has? I don't know, but let's not forget that Nick Saban is still on the advisory there for Kalen DeBoer. He's still on campus, and he is there to support Kalen DeBoer, so he is still there. Now, I think that has also helped us when it's come to the recruiting because he's still on campus, but I think that Kalen DeBoer has such a strong foundation, and the coaches he's brought around him, with Shepard, the wide receiver coach, and the experience he has in recruiting, Coach Womack out of South Alabama. I mean, and things he's accomplished. I mean, these are some coaches that probably haven't necessarily done it at the biggest level yet, but we've seen what Kalen DeBoer's been able to do and the coaching staff he's been able to work with and the success he's had. So I'm not worried at all. Like I said, it's unfortunate Nick Saban's gone, but he's still technically there. So again, I think he's got all the answers he needs. I think he's going to get all the any type of coaching experience that he needs to pull from Nick Saban and get from his head. I think he'll get that. Nick Saban's going to willingly give it to him. So again, I would still expect Alabama to be there in the top 5. I don't expect them to actually get even close to outside the top 10. So I would expect them to stay in the top 5 all year. I think they're going to be just fine.
That's a bold take. I don't agree with you, but I get it as an Alabama fan. You're the one that keeps up more on Alabama news than I do. Now, I do think that, like you were saying, though, to the Nick Saban point, I think that was mainly just for recruiting purposes. I think that he is there for DeBoer on any type of, how to handle Alabama culture, coming in to the South, what does that look like? I know DeBoer's had a little bit, he's kind of bounced around from career to career, but he's been in Washington, and what does it look like here? Kind of helping him kind of adapt well and helping him with the recruiting. I think that that's kind of what that was for. I'm not knocking the idea at all. If you can keep Nick Saban around on by any means, let's do it 100%. But the kind of the team that I was most interested about, and I'm curious to y'all's take as well, but is LSU. That's the team that I think is at probably in the most trouble here. Obviously, they're number 9 on the list. They're closer towards the bottom. It's obviously probably one of the safer picks on this list, but the reason that I'm so concerned is the level of talent that they've just lost to the NFL draft, right? Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr. Those are all top caliber guys that now they're left to replace with. And I understand that they're having big veteran guys being able to come in and obviously that's kind of the name of the game with college football is next guy up mentality. But I think that those are such elite level players that they're going to struggle greatly. They are still in the SEC. That is a loaded schedule for them. I think that what does help them on their schedule is, like we're saying, it kind of comes down to the back end of that schedule. They can afford to lose a couple games up front, but it's the back end of their schedule, how it plays out. And their back end of their schedule, I had it just up just here a second ago, but I know that they end it going Florida, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma. Those are kind of the bottomer team, worst teams on the SEC side of things. So they do have the benefit of their schedule working out for them, going Florida, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma.
Look, you're right, and I don't even think LSU will finish in the top 10. I don't think they'll make the playoffs at all. Their defense was, even with the talent they had last year, their defense was terrible. It was a bad defense. That's not the LSU style of defense that you're used to seeing. And I just don't think. I think they'll be out of the top 10 by week 4 or 5.
Yeah, and that, again, like I said, their schedule is definitely front-loaded. That's where a lot of it is. So it's safe to say, all it takes is for them to play a close game versus a decent team, and we could see them definitely fall outside of the top 10. But I don't think it's a bold take either. I don't think it's a hot take to say that LSU isn't going to wind up in a college football playoff spot. I don't know if they're a top 12 team. I really don't think that they are, unless these guys truly step up. But truly, I really don't think so, looking at how really packed a lot of these teams really are. So
I'll tell you one other thing too before we move on is I never, ever, ever, ever trust a Notre Dame football team. Never.
So you're worried about Notre Dame as well?
I think everybody's worried about Notre Dame. I wouldn't even say worried because it's used to it by now, but every time they get put in the playoffs, they get fucking stomped, dude. And it's because they're non-conference. You need to join a fucking conference. That's what you need to do, Notre Dame. Get off your damn high horse and join a conference because nobody trusts you. The committee doesn't trust you. And every time they've trusted you, you've gone to the playoffs and gotten steamrolled. So I won't ever trust a Notre Dame football team ever again until I see some things change. And the fact that they can just handpick their schedule and then, throw in a Duke and be like, well, we beat Duke. And like, well, shut the fuck up.
Yeah. And I mean, that is the thing. I do agree. I don't love the idea of non-conference, but I do love the idea of kind of being able to build your own schedule, not being forced to play these same exact opponents over and over. But with that, it also needs to be done with fidelity. They don't just need to pick, 1 to 2 opponents and say hey, well, we did our due diligence. And it's no, that's not the case at all. So, and that's why I think that we see this problem with Notre Dame on a much consistent basis. It's just because, by the time they get to these top games, this is their highest level of competition that they've faced up to this point. That's not Georgia's highest level of competition. That's not Alabama's highest level of competition, but it is Notre Dame's highest level of competition, and it's their first true test. So it's looking at their schedule, they have A&M to begin the season, but we don't even really know what this A&M program looks like. I don't have the full faith. I
could tell you, it's a fucking cult over there.
Right.
That place is a fucking cult.
That's what that is. Join a conference. I just don't understand.
And every year, A&M's like, this is our year, and you go fucking 8-4 every year. So shut the fuck up.
But Nathan, I think that you and your little Longhorns here have said a lot of the same things. That's a bold take coming from a Cowboys fan as well.
Hey,